who was here, interestingly, in November evening at the Azure user group? Anybody? Oh, that's okay. Just one gentleman. Okay, pretend all my jokes are funny and you've never heard them before, and we'll be sorted. Right, so we're going to do that, go through all that stuff. And then after lunch, we're going to have a nice, good break for lunch so we can all network and get to know each other, because that's the whole point of getting us all together here in London. And then Donovan's going to come back again and give you another whistle-stop, deep, techie, nerdy talk. And then we're going to have Stephen and Claire come up afterwards and join Donovan, and we're going to do some Q&A, answer a bunch of questions, and talk about DevOps culture change and all that sort of stuff. Okay? Great, so let's get going. The DevOps journey so far. So this is me, Martin Woodward, Martin Woo at Microsoft.com, or at Martin Woodward. If you want to shout abuse at me on Twitter, feel free. That's what I look like, in case you've forgotten. So my title, Principal Group Program Manager. Wow, that's crazy. Right, Principal Group Program Manager, that means I delete a lot of email, basically. And then the DevOps bit means I delete a lot of email using PowerShell scripts. So there we go. I work on the DevOps tools. So Donovan's done a fantastic job showing you around all the different tools that we have. I primarily work on the Azure DevOps side and also a bit on the GitHub side as well, our interfaces with GitHub. So that's where I work on the engineering team. Worked with Donovan when he was on the engineering team with me as well, and then been on here a few years. As Donovan said, Donovan actually was quite modest about this. This was Donovan that defined DevOps. So this was his definition of DevOps. People, process, and products. People are the hardest part by far. And so I'll go through and talk a bit about our culture change and the change that we went through. And we're going to touch on people, process, and products, and a lot of time on the people. Now, why do we do this? There's some stats from the State of DevOps report. The number that I particularly like is that we're able to spend more time doing new work. And this actually reflects in the data that, our day-to-day experiences. Because we're doing DevOps now, we're getting to a point where we're, getting okay at DevOps. We could be a lot better, but we're getting okay at DevOps now. We're spending a lot of time doing new work and a lot less time fixing bugs. And it makes sense because we ship, we can ship multiple times a day if we have to, and then we ship every sprint as well, every 3 weeks roughly. So if we're able to fix things so quickly, like Donovan said, if we get a customer support issue and then in 3 hours later we're able to turn that around and ship it out the door, then you're not going to get lots of customer support requests coming in. If you're able to fix lots of little things quickly, you don't build up this technical debt and your customer support burden goes down. But you have to, get on top of that debt first of all, which is the fun part. Some numbers, Donovan gave some quotes. These are internal Microsoft engineering numbers as of the end of last month. So right now we're doing 82,000 deployments every single day inside Microsoft. That's madness, isn't it? We used to ship every 2 or 3 years. Let's not talk about Longhorn. So every 2 or 3 years, roughly, we would ship in boxes. Now we're shipping 82,000 times a day. Now, that's total vanity metric, honestly. It's not 82,000 times a day to production or, our one system. Like Azure DevOps ships 3 times a day, basically, to production. And then a big release every 3 weeks. So, but we are deploying 82,000 times a day to somewhere, pre-production environments, test environments, and also production. We're doing Donovan mentioned about Azure repos. That's taking around 2.5 million Git commits a month, so from inside of Microsoft. The Windows team have moved over. They have their repo stored in there. And as Donovan mentioned, we're just bringing the Office team over right now. Theirs is an even bigger repo. They use a big mono repo. It's even bigger. But the interesting thing we're finding so far, the onboarding is going a bit smoother than the Windows onboarding, because obviously we've learned a lot of lessons, we've got a lot of training, we're able to roll that stuff out. So touch wood, so far so good. The biggest challenge with getting the Office team on board, Donovan mentioned the virtual file system for Git. We're actually taking that virtual file system for Git and moving it to the Mac. And so that's been a big challenge. We've gone through a couple of different iterations of that. You would think just use Fuse, people know about Mac file systems, but it doesn't perform very well. So we've had to go a bit under the hood a little bit further and write some stuff. So anyway, we're getting there. On the open source side, do you remember when Microsoft had like one open source project, which was Wix? That was the first open source project from Microsoft, the Windows Installer Toolkit. We now have 3,500 open source repos, that are just Microsoft ones. That's mad. It just goes to show you the change. And there's over 12,000 employees in Microsoft working every day in GitHub, relying on using that to collaborate with the community and build tools which are based on open source. And that's just, a huge culture change as well that I can talk to you about over lunch if you want, because that's been fun. But yeah, there's a whole lot of things we've had to learn. But we just use the entire tool set that we make available for you. We're using every single day to ship all the products that Microsoft ship, from Windows to Office to Minecraft, whatever. Here is the growth of the engineering system. I pulled this graph down while you were talking just this morning. It's just over 100,000 users is the number. But if you notice, it's not all engineers, which is fascinating. So, of engineers, there's just under 60,000, but in total, there's 100,000 people inside Microsoft using it, because it's people from the business, people from marketing, people like me that are overhead and delete email, It's everybody in there using the system and using that to communicate and build software, because that's what we do. It's our business, so of course we're in there doing it, but it's a huge population. And you can see the growth's been fairly crazy to keep up with, and that's just the Microsoft growth. That doesn't even take into account the public growth, which is like a hockey stick. So this is my journey towards DevOps. I actually started on the product. We just celebrated our 13th birthday, believe it or not. TFS, the precursor to all this, we turned 13 in April. St. Paddy's Day, March 17th. So it's just, turned 13, awkward teenage years. Not quite sure what its name is, all this sort of stuff, trying out new identities. And as it's come through, we started doing kind of agile. So Sprint 1 was back in 2010. I actually joined Microsoft November 2009, so I was awfully glad this happened, because I wasn't sure how long I was going to last in this big company. And then we went agile. I'm like, oh, okay, no, this is okay. And then we released the first version of the service called VSTS Preview back in June 2012. Then we went public. So I've been using the service actually since 2011 was when we started the first instances running. But the first public preview was back then. We went general availability back in 2014. So wow, that's like 5 years ago. Crazy. That's mad. Anyway, sorry. And then one engineering system. So this is when the conference that Donovan mentioned happened. June, there you go. That was the exact date, Tech Ready. That was when Satya stood up and started the one engineering system. We want a single engineering system that all of Microsoft use to build our products. We want the very best people in the company to be working on that engineering system, because if we invest money in our engineering systems, it makes the whole company more productive, but it also makes all of our customers more productive as well. So that was a big sort of culture change, and a very welcome one again. Then the Git virtual file system, which is now called the virtual file system for Git, because we're great at naming things. And then finally we renamed to Azure DevOps. It was more than a rename though. It was taking the Azure DevOps, as Donovan mentioned, Azure DevOps Suite, so what was called the Visual Studio Team Services before then, and actually splitting them out into these core services like Azure Boards, Azure Pipelines, Azure Repos. And there's a whole new set of customers who are just consuming single services from us now, such as Azure Pipelines is a hugely popular service. And so we'd actually split it out into services and did that. So that was September 2018. And then as of this morning, we've just started Sprint 151. This is where we're at right now. So Donovan mentioned about the WIP limits being too high right now. That's because it's the beginning of a sprint. Everybody's, eyes are bigger than the bellies. Everybody wants to do all this work, and they're thinking, yeah, let's do it. And then give it another week, and, reality will kick in. So we'll see how it goes. So when I joined Microsoft in November 2009, I joined from a startup, and this org chart came out in 2010, and again, felt awfully like, I recognize this. This was truth. This is Microsoft back then kind of thing. It was like all these divisions inside the company not really talking together, not really using the same tooling. If you were moving between divisions in Microsoft, it was like starting up in a completely new job. And what we're trying to do now is make it really easy to move between positions inside the company. If you are an engineer and you change teams, the goal is you should have code running in customers' hands by day one on the new team. So first day in the new team, you leave having got code running in the customer's hands. That's for an internal transfer. For an external hire, if you're a new hire into Microsoft, it's day 2. Because day 1 you spend in new employee orientation. Here's how to book travel. Here's your corporate Amex card. Here's how not to bribe government officials with it. All that sort of useful big company training. So this is what we've learned in that time. I've kind of broken it down into sort of 7 overall themes, and then we'll get through them in this hour. The first one we learned was to really try and be customer obsessed. Donovan mentioned DevOps is all about getting value into the hands of your customers. It's about customers. That's what it's about. It's not about how well we can build things, how many story points we can burn down in a sprint. It's about being customer obsessed. And it starts by listening to your customers. So obviously we do, the usual stuff you'd expect to do when you listen to customers. We have our forums. Our forums automatically feed data into our work item tracking system. So when you log an issue in developer community, it automatically pops up in our Azure boards instances, that sort of thing. We have Stack Overflow, which we monitor and track, make sure we've got good answer rates against questions, those sorts of things. We also, there's in-product feedback, so you can come into the product and go help make a suggestion. When you do that, believe it or not, you actually made Christmas for some engineer, because you've given them real live data, usually quite sweary and frustrated when people are making suggestions, but it's real live raw data that we can use to think, okay, well, where was this person? And because you're making the suggestion at exactly the point in the product where you're using it, we can trace back through the telemetry to see what happened up to that point and really dig in. So please do make suggestions when you come across them. You'll also see popping up from time to time this little, we would like your feedback pop up. It doesn't disrupt your work anymore. It used to pop up modally and you couldn't get rid of it, so hence the scores were quite low. Nowadays, it pops up in a little window down in the bottom. Hey, have you got time? We'd like some feedback, please. And you can keep on working and it doesn't get in your way and sort of stays there for a little bit and then goes away if it notices you're not using it. But if you give us your feedback, that gives us a score about how happy you are. And then you can also leave a comment if you want to. That score is just standard, Net Promoter Score. It's standard methodology, NPS. And we use that to track how happy people are. And we associate that with other data we're collecting as well. Fascinatingly, if you look at the active usage, so active users on Azure DevOps, it obviously, it goes like that through the week and then drops at the weekend. And then at Christmas, you see these massive drops when most of the world takes time off. NPS has a reverse correlation. Turns out if you're using Azure DevOps Server at the weekend and over Christmas, you're happier than everybody else, which, I'm assuming it's because you're using it for stuff at home and not because you're working on Christmas Day. But, it's really weird to see that reverse correlation between NPS and active usage. As well as this, we need to build empathy between our engineering teams and our customers. So what we do is we take our largest customers. Some of you are based in London, so you'll be able to, if you recognize the alias of your Microsoft person, you might be able to see you here. We take our customers and we assign the big customers a Microsoft engineer. So this sort of short circuits all the great support and all the great stuff you get, through your local subsidiary. This short circuits that and allows somebody on the engineering team direct contact with some big customers. And that's good, hopefully, for the customer because they get a direct feedback to the engineering team. But it's fantastic for us because it means every single PM, every single lead engineer I've got in Azure DevOps in this 700-strong organization, there's at least one person in every stand-up that knows a couple of customers and doesn't just know of them, knows them intimately. And that's vital in these stand-ups that the developers themselves can be customer advocates. It's not reliant on, the business owner or the product champion or whatever, the scrum, whoever's running that particular stand-up. It's everything, right down deep in the engineering team because you need to build empathy because you want to be customer obsessed. It stretches into our definition of done. So our definition of done used to be, when we first went agile, it was potentially shippable. That's straight out of the book, potentially shippable. There's a lot of wriggle room in potentially shippable. You know what I mean? It's It's better than it was. In the 2005 release, like the whole of Visual Studio 2005, we used to categorize builds as self-host or self-toast, where self-host meant it was safe to run and install on your machine, and dog food is another horrible term we use in Microsoft. I prefer drinking your own champagne personally, but dog food is what we eat. So yeah, we had a self-host builds, which were safe to run, and self-toast builds, which don't install this, you're going to have to repave Windows and start all over again, kind of thing. And that whole 2005 cycle, up to the second beta, we had 3 self-hostable builds the whole time. Like, terrible. Yeah. So it was barely compiling. And that's because people used to have these waterfall life cycles. They just used to throw stuff in there, didn't really care if it worked, because they knew they were going to have these big cycles afterwards called stabilization, where they would fix bugs. And the fixed bug might be actually really get this feature working, because it didn't work. I just choked it in so I'd be allowed to fix bugs during my stabilization period. All those games, get rid of them, potentially shippable. Great. Too much wiggle room. So then it became live in production. It has to actually be running in customers' hands before you can demo it to me at the end of a sprint and say it's done. Which was good, and we got a lot of stuff done, and we started shipping things. But you would be talking to somebody, and you say, so, how's that feature going? And you're like, it's working, How many customers are using it? Are they enjoying it? Is it working for them? Have you got any bugs? Have you got any errors? When will you find that out? Oh, 9 months, 6 months maybe by the time we start getting data back? No, that's no good. It's no good, as Donovan mentioned, it's no good just building and shipping really, really quick if you don't know if you're getting better or worse. If you're just building really quick, you're just going to go in the wrong direction, but really, really quickly and annoy all your customers, okay? So what you want to do is you want that telemetry so it tells you, am I getting better or worse? Have I made the system better? Have I fixed it better? And you want to be making very small incremental changes, better or worse, like an eye test in an optician's. Better or worse, better or worse. That's what DevOps is, just sitting there. Have I made it better or worse? And so this is our definition of done. Collecting telemetry which supports or diminishes the hypothesis. We also phrase our stories as questions, we think that this will happen, and this is how we're going to prove, what's the proof? Because we found by doing it as a hypothesis rather than as a statement of fact, people are a lot more prepared to test their own hypotheses. The best example I've got that's easy to understand is we put on the old VSTS homepage, the acquisition, we call it the page, where you go and click Start Free that Donovan showed you. That used to have this fancy video. And it was all because we thought the page looked ugly beforehand. We thought, well, we'll put a fancy video on it. Spent loads of money, produced a video, and it looked awesome. The best acquisition page you've ever seen in your life. Acquisition went down 20%. I'm like, what? And it turned out people watched the video and then forgot what they were doing and didn't really see the Start Free button hovering over the middle of the video. So we took the video off, put a graphic on, acquisition went up. And it's like, well, what's your business goal? Is your business goal to have something that looks shiny, or is your business goal to get people using the system, So all these sorts of testing and things, it's not always intuitive. We collect tons of data, as Donovan mentioned, but we're very careful about what we set as our goals for our teams, okay? So while we collect a lot of data that allows us to go analyze things after the fact and to ask questions of what's happened in the past, so we don't even have to build software to answer a question anymore. We can go look at the data that tells us. We set certain KPIs for the teams, and these are the things that we care about. So things like how quickly, velocity we don't measure in story points or t-shirts or whatever. We measure it in terms of how quickly can developers build, how quickly can they test, how quick can we deploy, and how quick can we learn, okay? That's how we measure velocity. And I'll make all these slides available as well at the end, so don't worry too much about grabbing them. And then usage, like how do we know if a feature's good or not? Well, are people using it? Are people getting value from it? Is how we measure if a feature is successful or not. What's the satisfaction of those people? What's the feature usage? What's the churn? So how many people start trying to use the feature and then fail? How many people are stopping using the feature every month? And then live site health, we're looking at, how quickly we detect there's an issue, how quickly we mitigate it, and then how quickly we can fix it later, the number of incidents we get from it. And we also look at our SLAs per customer, because It's no good. Like when you've got a globally available system in like 18 data centers, it's really easy to get lots of 9s because you're always up somewhere, okay? Great, so my overall availability is, whatever 9s. Fantastic. If Azure DevOps isn't working for you, then it doesn't matter that we've got 5 9s. It's 0 for me, so, fix me, please. So we monitor our SLA per organization and per customer and very, very accurately track those and look for the outliers, see who's having a bad experience and go investigate them. Things we don't look at, and obviously nobody here does, lines of code, like no, hopefully, no? Okay, good. Because if you have a day where you've deleted 2,000 lines of code, that was the best day ever, okay? Team capacity. We don't measure what the team's burn down is. I don't care what you as your team say is your burn down. I care what features were delivered and how much they were used. As a team, you have complete independence how you measure things and how you track things. And that also stops people, that gives you autonomy, so it allows you to do how you want to work, but it also stops teams feeling like they need to play games. Because as a manager, you have to be very careful about what questions you ask your teams, because they're going to game for those. So you want them to game for the things you care about, delivering value to customers, not what you're saying arbitrary, Fibonacci sequence you're using for measuring velocity or whatever, or the number of bugs found and things. I care about the number of bugs still running in production, not how many you found. Right, next is iterating over pain. So Donovan's definition of DevOps is really eloquent and fantastic. And then he mentioned his other definition of DevOps, which he doesn't write down. I've tried to sort of put it into words here. Find the bit that hurts, make it a little bit better, and repeat, okay? So what's your pipeline? Which bit hurts the most? Fix it a little bit and get better, and then go repeat again. Because often fixing it a little bit is actually enough. You think you're going to have to refactor and do all these craziness, and it turns out it doesn't become the next biggest problem after you've tweaked it a little bit. Something else is the issue. So Donovan showed the example of the race car. It was obvious that fixing the wheels was the biggest pain. And then the wheels got faster and faster and faster. And then refueling started slowing people down. And then, so what we did was try to make refueling faster by putting the petrol in quicker. And then, people started going on fire because they were trying to put the petrol in too fast that cars blew up and took engineers with them. So, okay, maybe we just shouldn't put petrol in. Maybe let's make our cars run quicker. That's the problem changes the whole time as you're improving your pipeline. So that's that. So one of our pains was around merging. When I started in Microsoft, it used to take 9 months to get code from check-in into production. 9 months, okay? Because it would flow down different branches and flow and go through testing and get into a beta test and then finally would land in the customer's hands. So we needed to get to what we call a trunk-based development model. We call this feature flow, release flow, sorry. But it's everything ships from master. This is how we ship. So when you merge, you're always merging into the master branch. You have very short-lived topic branches. Each of these lives on a pull request. And then you merge it into master, and then that's what we ship at the end of the 3-week sprint that we have. Now, because we've got a big system that's deployed across lots of global data centers, it takes us a while to deploy that sprintly release across our entire estate. It actually takes nearly a whole sprint to get that release to everybody. So during the sprint, there are usually 2 versions that are currently live, a maximum of 2 versions. So at the start of a sprint, release 129 from sprint 129 was 100% of the estate, and 130 is 0% of the estate. And by the end of the sprint, gradually, it's 0% on 129 and 100% on 130. Do you get what I mean? So we're slowly moving the whole estate over. But if you need to hotfix into production right now, It's no good waiting 3 weeks for that release to go the whole way through the estate. So we also have the ability to automatically update what's on the release branch. So if we check into master, and then if we push into the release branch, we cherry pick that change into the release branch, this will ship into production that day. We have 3 regular trains that leave the building every day that go into production, and then we can call a train, we can call an Uber if we need one, and just get a release out there if we need to, if it's a security fix or something like that. And I'll show you this. How on earth do you do that, though? So yes, okay, we moved to trunk-based development. Now what's the next pain for us? Well, the next pain is always, we're integrating here all the time, but we don't want to ship features to customers all the time. Like, we don't want to confuse our customers by showing them half-baked stuff. So if you're shipping what you've got all the time, how on earth do you fix that? So then we went down and we went and started using feature flags. Is anyone using feature flags here? Cool. So a feature flag is just a fancy name for an if statement, okay? It's nothing, no smoke and mirrors. Basically, you come in, you've got a bit of code. If feature flag is on, then go do my bit of code, okay? So go execute my code. And then you have the ability to switch that feature flag on or off, which controls which branch of code you're going down. That's all it is, nothing fancy. But once you're happy with that feature being on all the time, then you can take the code out, and then you have to remember to take the feature flag out, and that becomes the new path of code execution that you're following. If we're making major UI changes or things that we want users to be able to opt into and opt out of, we actually put this in the UI, so you can come in here and change the feature flag yourself, but oftentimes it's feature flags that we're controlling behind the scenes. With the UI, interestingly, any major UI change, we make that. The way we roll major UI changes out is it's opt-in, first of all. You have to go find it, opt-in. Great. A certain percentage of people do that. Then it's advertised as opt-in. So it says, hey, we've got a new feature. Would you like to try it? And then we get a whole new set of people that come try the software. We look at how many people opt out. If the opt-out ratio is greater than 5%, then it doesn't matter how clever you thought your UI was, it ain't working, okay? UI is like a joke. If you have to explain it, then it's not working. And so that's what we do. We look at the opt-out ratios. If people don't like it, by voting to go use the old system was better in terms of customer value, keep working. And then once we get our opt-out ratios down reasonably low, then we roll out the new UI. You're never going to please everybody because there's a certain amount of cheese moving, which people don't like, which is fine. So we get the opt-out percentages quite low until we're happy, respond to the feedback, then we make it the default. So that's how we do that. Feature flags are awesome. They're brilliant. We loved them. We went crazy with them. And you know what? Marketing love them. Because you can do things like Donovan come up on stage here and say the UK's live, and we switch the feature flag on, and boom, everybody can see the UK. That's great, and it's great for a demo, and it's great for like, ta-da, news, but it's horrible for engineering. Because, what happens sometimes is when you do launch, it goes wrong. So this was a keynote of Scott Guthrie did in 2013, so that was Connect 2013. And we came in and switched the feature flag on and then took down Azure because we missed it was a regex bug, actually. You always say, if you solve a bug with regex and now you've got 2 bugs, but there you go. That's what it was. So, hey-ho. So we went and we fixed that, but what we did after that, we've changed the policy across the whole of Azure, so no feature can get announced at a major event unless it's been running 24 hours. So if you want to get a career as a tech blogger or whatever, that Donovan mentioned the UK availability, that's actually been on a week, and we've told a couple of the customers here already that it was there to go try. We show these things off first, we sort of sneakily introduce them into market, show them off, before we'll do a big announce, just to make sure it's working. SQL Build's coming up soon, May 6th. Go use Azure at the weekend before Build, and you'll see a bunch of new features, and you can go, advertise them to Mary Jo Foley and get me fired. So that'd be awesome. Right. Next is having a production-first mindset. We had to build this. I guarantee 99% of you are better at having a production-first mindset than Microsoft were sort of 5-10 years ago. Because we were used to shipping on-premise software, most of the company was. We're used to shipping software, putting it in shrink-wrap boxes, getting it manufactured in Dublin and Costa Rica, and getting it into stores. That's what we did. We were awesome at it. Well, we weren't. What we didn't know how to do was run services and how to have live site availability and do that sort of stuff. So we had to build up a bunch of skills around keeping a service operational, keep it running. How do we handle incidents? How do we manage on-call, ratio? All that sort of stuff. We had to learn that and completely build that muscle from scratch. Thankfully, got some awesome people. We had some services already. The Xbox team were way ahead of us for a lot of people. The Bing team were as well, and then some of the core Azure folks. And then we've got a a whole new engineering discipline inside Microsoft of a site reliability engineer, SRE, and we've got that sort of as a whole career track building up, and it's been driven by a guy called Niall Moran over in Dublin, actually. So yeah, it's Niall Murphy, sorry, over in Dublin. So it's fantastic stuff. We're learning, we're getting better at it all the time. We've had to get better, but it's one of the things we had to learn. When we make mistakes, like I have a huge advantage over everybody here as well, in that you are my customers, and you're all actually quite nice people generally. Windows, they can be a bit shouty, but you lot are generally pretty cool. And if we explain like what we did wrong, we're not happy about it. We're as unhappy about it as everybody. But if we explain what went wrong, you all have the capability of understanding that and kind of making sure we're not telling BS. But we just explain why we're doing it wrong, what we're going to do in the future to make it right and not happen again. And then again, you're all engineers, you can understand that, and you can go, yeah, that makes sense, okay. And so it helps restore trust. That's huge, that's a huge special advantage I have, which I'm afraid you don't have. But we're totally transparent with our customer base, as transparent as we can be. Sometimes get into trouble for being transparent, because other parts of Microsoft are like, wait a minute, don't tell everybody it was my fault, it was their fault, so we just tell them. So, that's how it is. I'm not saying everybody can be this transparent in your own orgs, and I understand, but I'm lucky, so there we go. The other thing we learned during this whole automation issue, during this whole sort of release issue, as we were learning how to build life-site services, is that there's no such thing as partial automation. Donovan showed his release pipeline for VST, for Yo Team, and we had to build that for all of our products. When we first started, we would have scripts, we would have builds, we'd have scripts for deploying, but then we'd have little one-note checklists and things, because there's always stuff you have to do like that one time that you don't really, it'll take you like a week to write a script for, but you can just write down, like type this command in, So we write checklists in OneNote. This is great, at least you got a system, so that's better than nothing. But the problem we quickly found is, apart from this being PowerShell, anyone see a problem with this particular bit of PowerShell I've got on screen? What's that? Oh, the quotes, smart quotes as well. So we'd gone in and we'd actually used smart quotes, because when you put stuff into Office, it wants to make it look pretty for you, and it'll turn proper quotes into smart quotes, Unicode characters. Put that into a console, doesn't go well. Problem is, if it only happens on one of those in a big checklist of about 24 steps, and it's the one in the middle that doesn't really do anything on most machines, but it needed in to make sure it worked, and then you miss the fact that it worked in one of your instances, when you're going through that checklist across hundreds of them, then what you end up is we broke pre-production for a day because we didn't notice that we'd missed it. And that was like, right, what are we going to do to learn from this? There's no such thing as partial automation. We have to automate everything. The only way to get a change into production now is to check it into our repo, and then that script runs across the entire pipeline. It's a config change script, and runs across the entire pipeline, and that's how we get stuff into production. That prevents environment drift for us, but it also helps us make sure that that's how we get stuff in there. Also, it means that we have to get production access a lot less often, which is also a lot better and a lot more secure. That's great. So I'm going to jump in and I'll show you this now. During release, we have 5 rings. So this is the simplified view, and I'm going to show you the zoomed out view in a second. We sort of put things into different rings. So ring 1 being canary users, so internal users, us. Ring 2 is some of our smaller data centers. Ring 3, the largest external data centers. And then ring 4, the rest of the large international data centers. And then finally, ring 5, everybody else, the big people. And we deploy our bits across these rings slowly. Every single change goes through these rings. Even a config change goes through those rings. We call it safe deployment is what we call it. So when we're doing a major change, we wait 24 hours between each deployment to each ring, so we get a free busy cycle to make sure that we're okay. Yeah? And what we're actually doing here is this is the way that we're doing progressive exposure. It's quite a sort of low-tech way, really, but we're progressively exposing each new release to a larger number of our customers, and it goes exponentially up here, the number of customers we have. So let's just show you that. There's enough. So if I go in and I actually go into, Donovan was showing you Azure DevOps a second ago. So this is our dashboard that you come in and you see. It'll just refresh in a second now because I'll just go in. So there's a current, some builds running, so blue-green. Luckily, they're all at 100% test. This is live right now. So you can sort of see these are all our dashboards. But let's quickly look at, if we go to the pipeline, this is the pipeline that deploys TFS. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but there is still a service inside of Azure DevOps that's called TFS because we haven't completely microserviced everything yet. So this is the service that runs work item tracking, Azure repos, and a few other things as well, is in the TFS service. This is it. This is the pipeline. It's not actually as complicated as YOT, which I'm pretty impressed with. It looks simpler, and you can see the different rings. So there's a few things I want to call out here. There's UKS1, so UK South 1. That's where the UK is. It's in ring 2. So cool. And all, Western Europe, the different Central US, Western US too. So this is us deploying across all the different data centers we're deployed. If I zoom in a bit here, you'll see something pretty cool, which again was another one of those iterate over the pain moments. If I come in here, you got all the stuff, you're deploying to the different rings. You see we've got like approval gates before we go on to the next ring, all that sort of stuff. Look at this one, rotate prod realm secrets. So we do a bunch of security stuff, and what kept happening is we kept finding times where people weren't using Azure Key Vault to store their secrets, they'd maybe check them in somewhere, or they weren't rotating them often enough. So we'd have SSL certificates expire, we'd have keys that maybe somebody at some point had stored somewhere outside a Key Vault or got leaked and then they were still being used in production. You want to be rotating your production sequence quite frequently. So how do we do that? Like, how do we stop it? It's like I was talking to one gentleman this morning who tears down production every night and rebuilds it again. This is the equivalent for us. We tear down all of our secrets for all of our environment every time we deploy, and we rotate and put new ones in. And that means the next job that comes through is going to fail very, very quickly if it doesn't have the new set of secrets, if it isn't loading them from the Azure Key Vault and doing all that sort of stuff good. We're going to spot these problems as soon as we try and deploy rather than getting it done. And so again, we've modified our pipeline because we noticed we forgot to do something. Just like Donovan had the jack person behind the guy with a jack. This is us, the security person, behind the security people, making sure we're rotating these secrets, because we don't think these secrets are ever going to leak out, but we're going to change them 3 times a day, you know what I mean? So just to make sure. Cool. And also while I'm here, actually, I should show you, we're talking about chunk-based development. So if I go into repos, and I'll just go and look at the Git repository, what I'll first of all show you is, there's the DevOps blog. So the way that we even did our blog, we just pushed a blog post live about the UK thing going live. So if I go into my pull requests for the blog, we'll actually see there's the pull request for the blog coming up. Hopefully, there we go, available in the UK. So we'll click on that. It's now ready for review. So we're going to come in here, and then it's also blah, blah, it's all been ready for approved. I've done all my comments, I've responded to all my things. So I'm going to hit the complete button and merge that in. So that's now merged into the blog, and that's how we do our blog, system even, by doing it as just markdown files. But so if you go check out the Azure DevOps blog, you'll be able to read that post there that we were just looking at there. If I look here at the Azure DevOps pull request, so this is Azure DevOps, the system. And you come in and you see, and you've got all these are live. And I always like looking to see one that's got a lot of comments on it to see what's going on. What I'll do, I'm going to go to completed just to see, because then we can go look at a build that's finished as well. And you see this one here. I don't know what this means because it's like super technical, whatever. I'm not quite sure. But I'm going to go look at this pull request. This is a real live pull request of a feature. Oh, interesting. Let me just bring up let's just quickly check something else. Sorry, a second. That was being cherry-picked into the 149 branch. I'm going to look at one that's been going into master before it's cherry-picked, because then it'll be a more interesting discussion. So it's coming into here, coming into master, and then if I want to take this change and push it into production, I could actually cherry-pick it and put it into one of my release branches afterwards, but I don't. I just want to take a quick look. And if I look, and we've got various different builds succeeded, we had an approval done. People don't bother doing code reviews until the build's passed, Because what's the point? You know, humans are terrible at spotting bugs. Awful. We're great at spotting that you've not used the right convention for curly braces or whatever, or you know, you've used tabs instead of spaces or whatever. We're great at spotting that. We're great at spotting naming conventions. We're great at spotting the fact that, hey, you've used this code library over here. I think maybe you should have used this code library over there instead. Let's just have a quick look at some of the comments on here that people have done. I'm just trying to look now. So, no, it wasn't very interesting one I picked. I should have picked a more interesting one. Never mind. But if we look at the build succeeded, this was the build that validated the pull request. So you know the old days where you used to have like Brian the Build Bunny or a monkey thing that you would sit down on somebody's desk when they broke the build. Well, that's great and everything, but a bit of a blame culture, you know. What we don't want is ever to break the CI build, ever. Because that should always be green. It should always, because we're shipping from that bad boy, you know what I mean? Like that always needs to be green. So what we want to do is have pre-merge failures. Before this code was ever merged, let's check it and make sure. So we run our builds on the pull request, so we do pre-merge validation. You see, this is the build that's running. It took 37 minutes in total to do the whole build. But if I look at our unit tests, 88,500 unit tests ran in 11 minutes, which is up a little bit. It's warning us that it's gone up because we're slowing down the unit test execution. We try and keep that below 10 minutes where possible, so there you go. But 88,500 unit tests ran on that one change I made, that small change. And that's essential to make sure we know we've got, you know, proper, we can actually ship this into production with confidence in this shipping. One of the things that's quite interesting as well in here, let's just see if I've got some. No, that's going to work okay. What we're actually able to do is notice that tests that don't run the first time, but run the second time, and it works. Who's got flaky unit tests in their code bases? They'd run and then yeah, exactly. You know, it's just like, nobody likes to admit them, but we all have them. And so what we do is we take every night, we take the last build that ran successfully, so we know it was a good build, and we run those unit tests against it 10,000 times. And then if the unit tests fail, we know it's the unit test fault, not the code. And then so we flag that test as a flaky test, we log that as a bug, and somebody comes in and fixes it the next day. And that's how we're able to make sure we don't have flaky tests stay within the build. Right. So that's, and then, yeah, I showed you the pipeline, and we've got releases going on all the time. So we have to build life-cycle culture. You're all better at that than us. The best thing that happens when you're on call is that if you are the DRI, so if you've had something go wrong and it's your part of the system, it's actually Satcher that calls you up. Well, it's a robot Satcher. It's like Satcher's voice recorded, and he says, you know, our customers are important to us, life-cycle availability is down right now, please get on the phone. And you've got 5 minutes during the working day and then 15 minutes in the middle of the night to get on the line and start fixing this issue. Right, team autonomy. So, you know, we've always got this tension. We all have it between control and speed. Yeah, it's just this constant. And what we're trying to do as software professionals is we're trying to get as much innovation as possible with the minimum of control to maximize our innovation. This line Ken Schwaber calls the edge of chaos, which rings a bell with many of the projects I've worked in. But yeah, we're trying to skirt the edge of chaos as closely as possible. But we want to recognize that fact and use like methodologies and use processes and use ways of working that help us get as close to the edge of chaos as possible, help us get the most innovation and the most speed with having just enough control and no more. So with sort of as we moved agile within our business, it was heavily influenced by this book called Drive by Dan Pink. Really good book. If you can't be bothered reading the book, get the audio book. If you can't be bothered listening to the audio book, go to YouTube and there's an RSA Animates video. It's like 5 minutes. That's fine. Anybody can watch that. It tells you about the same as the book. It's like his TED talk in 5 minutes. But go watch that video at least or read the book. Really, really, really good book. And this completely changed how we thought about how we want to run our teams. Because building software is a creative act. It's not just, you know, it's not sales. How you motivate salespeople is by giving them compensation bonuses, giving them money. That's how you motivate sellers. works. Give them a speedboat, they'll sell more for you. With creative things, turns out with software engineers, don't tell my boss this, if you give us enough money so that we're kind of happy, it has to be enough. Like, you have to pay me enough. But so I don't really have to worry about money too much. If I'm having fun, I'm probably not going to go and look at the job boards and see what else is going on. I'm having fun. I'm learning. And we find this is common. Like, if people are having fun, if they're learning, if they're getting better at their art, if they're getting better at what they like to do, they're honing their profession, then they're happy in their role and they're solving problems. And that's common across all problem-solving domains. To do that, you need autonomy. If there's nothing that annoys a developer more than saying no to them. No, you can't do that. Computer says no, because they'll try and find a way around that, obviously, because that's what we're all coded to do. And you just want to make it easy for them to do their job. You want to give them autonomy, but you need some alignment, because if you don't have any alignment, you end up with a train wreck. Okay, so you need some alignment, but give them autonomy. We have complete autonomy over every team, down to a feature team. So a feature team's like, a pizza team, like a dozen people. Every team has autonomy over what they do and how they do it. If you want to use Scrum, if you want to use XP, if you want to use Waterfall, if you want to use, Ibbledy-Jibbledy, the latest whatever process is out there, go use it. That's awesome. Learn, do whatever you want to do. But what we have alignment on is how our organization's structured and the roles in it, how our teams are farmed out, and then the cadence in which we deliver. So we deliver every 3 weeks. We have these 3 trains a day, that sort of thing. We used to have autonomy over cadence, and it was fascinating that it didn't work. And what happened was there wasn't a common language between teams, but also it's a bit like, in the old days where we used to have to defragment our disks. People remember doing that? Okay. There's more old people here than you'd think. So when you had to defrag your disk, you would get those missing blocks, and then you'd have to move stuff up into the blocks to make the disk run fast and things. That's what was happening with our software, because every team has dependencies between teams. And it'd be like you get this little bit of a half sprint missing here and a half sprint missing there, and it just didn't work. By having a regular heartbeat, a predictable cadence, the organization ticked along like a clock. The way we structure our organization is we used to have program management, so I normally wear a blue shirt, so that was me. Program management, development, and test. That's how we were structured. Our test was very different from testing when I had a real job. It was these are test engineers, software developer engineers and test, right? Wrote tests all day, every day. Lots of big UI tests, quite complicated, engineers wrote tests. We decided to get rid of that, and we merged test and development together and just have a single engineering career stream. You build it, you run it, you own it, okay? You're responsible for how this works in production. If it goes down, you get woken up. So you want enough testing to make sure it doesn't go down, but not too much testing that you can't get anything done. You know what I mean? We find it helps to have that balance. And we also have dedicated SRE people as well, who are specialists in keeping systems running and help us migrate and keep us running systems. And we pull these disciplines together into a single feature team, 2 pizza team, so a dozen people or so, and they're responsible for delivering the value to the customer. So they own the features. We don't do follow the sun development, so where we split feature ownership across geographies. We don't split things by horizontals, so we don't have a database team and a UI team and a blah, blah, blah team. We have a team that owns a feature that has people from each of those disciplines in it. Our team's made up of 10 to 12 people. They sit physically together in the same room usually, roughly. There are some exceptions, I'm one of them, but we roughly keep them in the same room, and that's to help them be a team. We don't do follow the sun development. If you've got a feature, it's owned by a team in a room somewhere. We have development centers in Redmond, IDC, so India and North Carolina, and we have some small ones in different parts of the world, but they're our major development centers. The self-managing, they work, and they stay intact for about 2 years, 12 to 18 months. They stay together as a team. We might change what that team work on in that 12 to 18 month period. So we might move them from, say, working on, repos to pipelines or whatever. but we keep them together. Because the teams go, build up strengths, and they all start to know each other. They go through that storming and forming period, so we keep the team intact. How do we keep the teams together and in sync? Microsoft still, despite Teams sort of changing how we talk a bit, we're still very much an email-centric culture. So we send these sprint mails, OKR reviews we're calling them nowadays, but roughly every 3 weeks. And then we have a team chat every quarter, and we have an experience review that says how I want my feature to work. That's very aspirational, the experience review. This is what I want to get to. This isn't what I'm going to deliver this sprint. This is where I want to be, I've had experience reviews where I've done the experience review, we've agreed that's our direction, and we're going to set off, go building it. I went and helped opensource.net for a couple of years, came back, and my experience they were still working towards because it kind of got put on the shelf for a little bit and then brought back down off the shelf again, and then they're delivering towards that again. So yeah, they're long-lasting things. And the benefits of transforming like this is lots of happy people with sticky notes and laughing and things, apparently. So there we go. Okay. Right. Then we want to, Donovan sort of hinted to this already, and we talked a little bit about it, shift left, so bring the quality left. When we had all these software developer and engineers in test, we had a lot of automated UI tests, loads of them. They would take, we used to call it our NAR, because we like TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. So our NAR was our nightly automation run, ran every night. Turns out if you call something a nightly automation run, it'll not only run all night, it'll take all night, okay? In fact, it took 22 hours. And in, I think, 10 years that I was on the team when we had the NAR, I don't think it was ever green. It was always a little bit red. There'd be a test fail here, and quite often it'd be unreliable, flaky tests. Quite often it'd be because some environment went down, because you needed lots to be up to do this. It just wasn't reliable, took a long time to run, wasn't giving us the value we needed. And so as management, as leadership for the team, we had to how are we going to get to the point where we're shipping from master and able to get a good verification of our unit tests and of our test quality on every single pull request? We can't wait 22 hours to review a pull request. We need feedback back, ideally within 10 minutes, but half an hour I can live with. So we knew we needed to shift our test portfolio and make it a lot more based on unit tests and a lot less on UI automation tests. Interestingly, we're developers, so we always argue over names of things as well as curly brackets and tabs versus spaces and all that sort of stuff. So being Microsoft, we got rid of the religious discussion about what's a unit test and what's an integration test and blah, 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 by just getting rid of those names and giving them numbers, so L0 to L3. But you can think L0 is basically a unit test as you think of it in a traditional TDD sense, a proper X unit, N unit, J unit test, that's just testing completely isolated. L1 tests, we have a lot of logic that's stored us in stored procedures, in sprocs. And so we needed to be able to test the logic within those. So we needed a database there to be able to test them, but how do we do that sort of thing? So they were our L1 tests. And then when you saw those 83,000 tests, or 88,500 tests, that was all the L1 and L0 tests that were being ran against that. The L2 tests test the service against the APIs, and then the L3 are the end-to-end environment tests. We do those on the CI builds, so after that's post-merge. And you know what? You saw all that green. Despite only running the unit tests, the L1 and the L0 tests, even in pre-production and all the CI builds that run, it's very rare that these go red and spot something that wasn't spotted up above. So therefore, we know it's working. We've changed our test to help us work quicker, and it's working for us. But it's great to say, we want to go to more unit tests. But we started out here in Sprint 78 with all the wrong type of tests that we didn't want, all the UI tests. How on earth are we going to get to the point where we have just unit tests mostly and a few UI tests? Well, we stop work for a couple of sprints, go refactor our test code base. No, that's obviously not going to happen because we'll be bankrupt by the time we've done that. So what we did was we did a little bit every sprint. We made it a little bit better every sprint. And you can see this is the number of tests across each sprint as we go through. And you see we started building up the unit tests, getting better. We started bringing down our UI tests, bringing those down. And then you see them go down actually in lumps as well, as we sort of have a bit of a push on it and things like that, or we're shipping stuff. And then boom, and then you get to here, sprint 120, we're done. That's 2.5 years of transformation there. So at baby steps, we couldn't just do it overnight. We had to take our time and identify if this was the right thing to do. So I've quickly showed you a pull request. So a pull request L0 and L1 tests. We do all the pre-merge stuff, and this is where we do our code reviews. Not only do we do that, we also do like check in, you're not making sure you're using credentials, run your compliance checks, do all the stuff you want to do as early in the inner loop as possible, because you want to shift left your quality, you want to shift left compliance, you want to shift left governance, you want to get that while you're looking at the code and your mind's still in that context, and you don't have to come back to it later. Right, the next thing we're kind of learning right now is around how to take infrastructure as a flexible resource. Remember, our legacy comes from TFS, on-prem product, in an actual shrink-wrap box. And then we were taking that product and we're still shipping it on-prem, but we also want to ship it to the cloud. So we're not cloud only, we're on-prem and cloud, and we want one code base that goes both places. So we have to have an architecture to support that. And that very much constrains how we build things. If we were just cloud only, we'd be all about the PaaS, because that's how you get density of compute. If if you look at what's the Have I Been Pwned guy, Troy? Is it Troy? Someone? Yeah, Troy Hunt. Yeah, look at him. He runs his entire website, which is used by millions of people. Has loads of data for like cents. Because Azure Functions and all these PaaS services and all the stateless services and things, they're so cost effective because you've got high density of compute. At the end of the day, you're basically paying for electricity in a data center, We can't go that whole way because we also need to ship on-prem. So the way that we also had this legacy code base that we're trying to serviceify, So this is the reality of the picture. I wish I could present it as magic microservice architectures, aren't we amazing? But sadly, this isn't where we are yet. It's where we're heading. But where we are right now is we have our databases, and we have actual VMs running agents and job agents, and we have an actual relational database that's in Azure SQL, and then we have Azure Blob Storage. The only difference really between an on-prem TFS server and Azure DevOps server, Azure DevOps services in the cloud is there's an if statement that says, am I in Azure? If I am, store the binary data in Azure Blob Storage rather than in the SQL database, because Azure Blob Storage is super cheap. SQL in the cloud's more expensive than Azure Blob Storage, but on-prem, SQL storage costs the same, and it's very easy to back up. So that's why we make that code optimization, that cost optimization. So we split out TFS, the service, from SPS, and then we have multi-tenant instances of those, which is good. So we're getting there, and then you noticed that ring I showed you was actually these TFS deployments, and then we have other services, SPS and AEX and blah, blah, blah. We have lots of different services, but not as many as you would think. Then we're building, each new service now gets built as a little containerized microservice, usually in .NET Core, usually running in Docker, that runs in a container. And that allows us to then be able to take the same code and easily run it on-prem as we do when we're running it in the cloud. So service hooks, things like that are all written. These are newer services. They're all written containerized. And we're moving more and more stuff over to .NET Core and into containers because the performance benefits of .NET Core are insane, like insane. We did some services. We did it as an experiment, a rewrite of one, just to see what would happen. And it turned out it was so much cheaper to run in terms of the amount of throughput we got through it. We're like, oh, damn. That kind of justifies us rewriting things in .NET Core, which nobody wants to do. You want to just move on. So anyway, we're going to do a big .NET Core, a slow .NET Core rewrite over the next year or two. Last thing to wrap up. And this is really what I've learned from talking to customers as well as us. You see these problems in your DevOps pipeline. You see where organizations have gone to. We're okay. There are other organizations that I look at and I'm like, wow, I wish I was doing DevOps like they are. And you think, well, how am I ever going to get there? I've got to refactor this. I've got to train everybody. I've got to blah, blah, blah. I've got to go to Docker and containers and all this, Kubernetes and all this sort of stuff. Never going to get there. And you start building this huge migration path of how we're going to get to DevOps and you never start. Don't. That's completely an anti-pattern of DevOps. Because the whole point of DevOps is to fix a little bit, see what hurts, and move on. Fix a little bit each time and move on. Remember, every journey starts with a single sprint. You've got to just make a little bit of a change and just get a little bit better every sprint. And you can see, remember when we had that chart of our tests? Each sprint we got a little bit better. 2.5 years later we got there. It takes a while. From the State DevOps survey again, we noticed very much this rang true that and we see this in teams as well, you start off doing a bit of DevOps, you think, way, this is awesome, we're doing amazing stuff, we're shipping into production, it's awesome, and that's what we got to. And then we were like, whoa, if we're going to do this pull request validation business, right, we've got to completely rewrite our unit tests now, we've got to completely rewrite how we test things, and you discover all this debt you didn't know you were carrying. And so you have a little bit of a dip, and then you sort of work through that, and then you get back into that higher performing sort of range. And so you notice teams that start off doing DevOps, super effective, and then as they get a bit deeper, they have a little bit of a dip in like their love of DevOps, and then it sort of moves back up again, and they get more and more effective again as they go through. And that's very common across teams. The final thing I'll leave you, DevOps isn't a magic bullet, just giving somebody DevOps in their job title, just saying we're doing DevOps now, ain't going to fix anything. If you're still shipping the way you were shipping before, it isn't going to get better. Just try and get a little bit better each sprint. Everybody, go home at the weekend, forget about everything because it's the weekend, come in Monday morning, what can I do this week to make our pipeline, our process, just a little bit better? And then the next week, what can I do to improve it a little bit more? And if you can keep doing that, before you know it, you'll have this amazing process and you'll really love where you are. So thank you very much for your time. We're going to have lunch, and then Donovan's going to come back and show us some more demos. Thank you. I'm hoping lunch is ready, is it? Yeah. Woohoo! Lunch is ready. Okay.